Hello and welcome to Post, the channel where we discuss all things hockey and all teams. Now first, before I begin, I know I'm wearing a San Jose Sharks shirt, and I know I'm wearing an Anaheim Ducks shirt. There's a huge clash right here. But the video is about, well, America. It's about the Miracle on Ice, and so I just chose two American teams of merchandise I have. So I do apologize, I know it looks a little strange. So you're here to tell me about the story and the history behind the Miracle on Ice in 1980.
That's right.
That's correct, right?
That's right.
Actually don't know the story that well. I know that they're a huge underdog, and I know there's a movie about it, and that's kind of the whole point of this video. It was requested a lot of times,
my goodness,
and we're very excited to make it because we very much respect the United States history of hockey. So explain the story a little bit to me.
Okay.
We're going to go watch the movie, Miracle, by Disney, the Disney one, right?
Yeah, the 2004 movie by Disney.
Yeah, and then we're going to come back and make another video and discuss it. So this will all happen in one video for you.
You'll see it in one shot, but you'll see us the before movie and after movie versions of Brent and Neil.
Exactly. All right.
So first off, the tee up. What we need to appreciate when we look back to 1980 is the political climate that surrounds the all of the Olympics in 1980 around that time and what was going on. First off, it wasn't Russia, it was the Soviet Union.
Right.
It was this gigantic country that really has existed since 1917, but by the end of World War II started to absorb, maybe not into its national borders, but certainly into its sphere of influence, a lot of other countries in Eastern Europe. So the Soviet Union consisted of all of present-day Russia, along with Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, the Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Belarus. All of that was in the USSR, or what the Russians called it, the Soyuz Sovietsky Sotsialistichesky Respublik, which is the CCCP that you see on their uniforms. And it was a large country with a very, very strong hockey tradition. Now, the Americans had won gold in the Olympics in 1960.
Okay.
The last player cut from that team was a guy by the name of Herb Brooks.
I've heard that name.
You have, and you'll see him in this movie because Herb Brooks ends up being the coach of the 1980 team.
Okay.
The Russians then won Olympic gold in 1964, 1968, 1972, 1976, and now we're coming to 1980.
Wow.
And the Russians have a very powerful country, which is very much an adversary of the United States. There really are two superpowers in the world.
Yeah, it's a different time back then. The space race happened in the 50s and the 60s, and then
everything. Yeah, it was so competitive.
Then the Cold War.
The Cold War really has existed from the time Winston Churchill coined the term, and the Iron Curtain, from the late 1940s right until 1990-ish. 89, things started to open up, and by 1991, the Soviet Union began to dissolve. But, you know, it was called the Cold War. There was never a lot of hot shooting going on, but there was lots of competitiveness between the countries.
Yes.
And in sports as well. The Soviet team consisted of many of the players that Canadians would recognize from the 1972 series.
Yes.
We have Alexander Yakushev, Boris Mikhailov, Alexander Maltsev, Valery Vasiliev, players like that played in 72 that Canadians heard a lot of. And here they are still in 1980, and they're still getting it done. So, you know, these are the best in the world. And here's the thing about Olympic hockey in 1980. Pros could not play. Professionals, like in the NHL or even the AHL or even in a European league, were not eligible to play in the Olympics because it was a professional sport for them, and they couldn't play as non-professionals, as amateurs. But the Russians found a way, and some of the other teams in the Eastern Bloc found a way in many of the sports that they played. In the Russian team, or the Soviet team, as it was really should be called, you were in the army and you played hockey for fun.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of these people were in the army. In fact, we've got a photo, I think, that should be appearing behind us. And from left to right, it's Alex Kasatonov, Viktor Tikhonov, who became a coach, Vladislav Tretiak, the famous goalie, for the USSR, Igor Larionov, who you'd know from playing later on in the NHL, and the guy in the far right is Slava Fetisov.
Oh, cool.
Okay. And you'll see after we watch the movie and we do a little breakdown as to what happened to these players after the Miracle on Ice game in 1980, what their careers ended up like on both the American and the Soviet sides.
I guess I have questions, but I don't want you to answer too many because we're about to watch the movie, so I kind of want to learn throughout the movie,
Yeah.
and then discuss it. But
So before the movie starts, I'll just leave you with this.
Okay.
The Russians are technically amateurs according to Olympic definitions, but they are in every way the same quality, the same degree of training as a pro. These guys are amazing. The American team, built by Herb Brooks, was cobbled together from university hockey, largely in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Massachusetts, Boston University. It was the source of many players. We have North Dakota, Wisconsin. So the northern tier of the United States, the traditional college hockey ranks, and that's where they pulled the players from.
okay,
And these players went out on the ice, and there are some interesting turns. It wasn't the gold medal game, for one thing. The Miracle on Ice was not the gold medal game. It was
really?
the semifinal.
oh,
And it was the U.S. playing Russia in the semifinal. The winner was going to get the winner of the other side, and ended up being Finland. So the Americans actually had to play Finland for the gold after they already had completed the Miracle on Ice. They beat Finland and got the gold medal anyway.
oh,
Don't want to ruin the movie for you.
oh, you just did, I think.
But there's lots to talk about after the movie to see what happened afterwards.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so
Sure.
we're going to watch the movie.
Let's go do it.
All right.
All right, well, it's a couple hours later.
What do you think?
It's interesting.
Very.
Yeah, the movie itself, there's a lot of character building in the movie, so it was a
Yeah.
bit slow at times, but
Yeah.
the overall story was fantastic.
Yeah. It left me with the, I was there. I mean, I wasn't in Lake Placid,
Yeah.
but I wasn't far away. Montreal's only 80 or 90 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So this was happening, not far, and probably people, around me were as engaged in the whole thing as I was at the time. Now, I wasn't in Montreal then. We'd moved away, but it was a very local, to me, type environment, Lake Placid. I was there just a couple of years ago, as a matter of fact. I landed there at the airport briefly. At the time, I don't think it was as impressed upon the public that this wasn't a fluke, it was the result of hard work.
Oh, okay.
And I think anybody would think when the Soviets get taken out, they must have all had the flu, or they must have just had an off night. And they might have had a bit of an off night
Yeah.
to be beaten by a bunch of college kids. But as you can see from the movie, and I think they did, from what I've read, they did a very diligent job at trying to make sure that it was true to reality and true to the real history. Herb Brooks skated the pants off these guys.
Yeah, he did, and I'm curious to know if the whole movie is completely 100% accurate, because at the beginning of the movie, it starts off with him having a conversation with the board of directors for USA Hockey, or whoever that was, and he had to do some pretty heavy convincing to try and even be considered for the job that he was applying for, which was the coaching position. I wonder if that conversation actually happened like that, or...
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of the people that would have been in the room were still around in 2004 when they made the movie. So even if that exact conversation for word may not have happened, probably the gist of it did. I wasn't in the room, though, myself. So beyond that, I don't know. But it was an amazing sports story, and several media organizations, as the century came to a close and as the millennium came to a close, coming up on 2000, it was voted by more than one outlet as the biggest sports story of the century.
Wow, the biggest of all, across all sports.
Across all sports.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the fact it was the Americans, and the Americans are doing most of the voting, is probably part of that. And that's how it works. That's how the world works. They have the largest media empire centered in New York City, and they decided that was the biggest story of the century.
And it probably was. I
think,
mean,
yeah.
I've heard about it and not watched the movie till now. I mean, I'm sure I've watched that movie when I was a kid, but I don't remember it. But it's a pretty fantastic story. I was disappointed that they didn't show the end of the tournament that year against when they played Finland for the gold medal. I wanted to see some of that in the movie.
Right.
I knew they won because he told me before we watched it, but I still wanted to see it.
Yeah, and even in the movie, they paid heed to it. They didn't forget that it happened, but they just kind of dreamily fast forwarded their way through the whole thing.
It's like they went, to me, and the impression that I got in the movie is that they just went into the game knowing that they were going to win because they didn't talk about it. It wasn't a big deal that they won the gold medal. It's just, we beat the Russians, and of course we're going to beat Finland, but or the Soviet Union, not the Russians. Yeah.
So some interesting stories happened to both players from both teams after the Olympics were over. The Soviet Union remained the Soviet Union for about another decade or so. Starting around 1989, it was still the Soviet Union, but they were led by a guy by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev, who started a new way of looking at the world and a new way of running the country. and these were called Glasnost and Perestroika. These were his programs to try to open up the Soviet Union and make it more, maybe even democratic. And within a couple of years of that, the Soviet Union actually broke apart and became Russia. And then there was other countries like Belarus and Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and so forth. So what happened up until 1989, the Russian players, many of them were drafted by NHL clubs just in case they were ever allowed to play outside of Russia.
Really?
Yeah. So back even in the late 70s, some of these players had been drafted, but they couldn't, they weren't allowed to play. They weren't allowed to leave the country. Because this wasn't just America versus Russia, two big powers. Russia was a closed society. You couldn't leave Russia unless you had very special permission. And people often in the past, when they did leave, they would not go back. They would defect from Russia. Or in the case of Czechoslovakia at the time, the Stasny brothers. And this all happened in the, I guess it was the early 80s, maybe even late 70s, when they just happened to be outside of Czechoslovakia on some international tournament, and they went in hiding, didn't go back.
Wow,
there's quite a bit of intrigue as to how they were kept. What did happen, though, is the Russian Ice Hockey Federation did allow their players to finally play an NHL game starting in 1989.
Okay.
So 9 years after the Olympics, several players did play in the NHL, and they are as follows. Helmuts Balderas, who's actually not Russian, he's Latvian, but he was part of the USSR at the time. He played in 1989 for Minnesota. And he was one of, if not the oldest person ever drafted. He was 36 years old at this point, and he was drafted and played in the NHL briefly. Sergei Makarov, from 89 to 97, played for San Jose, Calgary, and Dallas. And he's the oldest rookie ever to play in the NHL. In fact, they changed the rule after he became a rookie, because to have someone who's a rookie at the age of 35 or 37 or whatever it was,
I guess,
kind of screwed it. You know, if they were a very experienced and excellent hockey player, all the 20-year-olds are kind of getting ruined by that. So now a rookie has to be much younger to be official.
I think it's under 26 or something.
Yeah. Alexei Kazatonov, from 89 to 96, played with New Jersey, Anaheim, St. Louis, and Boston. Vladimir Krutov played for Vancouver, and Sergei Starikov played for New Jersey starting in 1989. Now, there's an interesting other person here, Slava or Vyacheslav Fetisov. He played for the Detroit Red Wings. Now, he won 2 cups with Detroit in 1995, starting in 95, and he played in 97 and 98 as well, winning the 2 cups in those 2 years.
Right.
And he retired after the 1998 season. But if we go back a little farther, New Jersey in 1995 played Detroit. So Fetisov was with Detroit.
Right.
And on the New Jersey team was Neil Broughton, who played on the American side. And Neil Broughton was going in on offense. Fetisov was the last guy, on defense, fell down. Broughton went around him and scored the Stanley Cup winning goal.
Wow.
To give the cup to New Jersey that year. That's cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Other players in the American team who ended up doing great in the NHL, some of them. Ken Morrow is an interesting story because he went right away to the New York Islanders later that year in 1980, and guess what they did in that 1980?
Won the cup.
Won the cup. I think he was the first guy, maybe still one of the very few, if any others, to to win the Stanley Cup and the Olympic gold medal in the same year.
Jonathan Toews would have done it in 2010.
There you go.
Yeah.
But Ken Morrow broke that open in doing that. Now he's, the last time I read, he was the director of pro scouting for the New York Islanders. He's still with the organization.
Good for him.
Yeah, Mike Ramsey played in the NHL for 14 years. Most of them with Buffalo, but also with Detroit and Pittsburgh. Dave Christian played 14 years in the NHL, and he was with Winnipeg and then Washington and Boston. And interestingly, Dave Christian's father and uncle were on the 1960 U.S. Olympic team, which was the last one to win the gold medal. And Herb Brooks, the coach, I think as we mentioned just prior to the movie, he was the last guy cut from the 1960 team.
Ooh.
And in the movie, of course, you see his wife and him talking about what kind of demons he's trying to get rid of.
Right, because she said that you only want to do this because you didn't have the chance to in 1960, so you want to do it now.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Mark Johnson played with Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Hartford, St. Louis, and the New Jersey Devils, and now he coaches the University of Wisconsin-Madison women's hockey team in college hockey. Jack O'Callahan played for Chicago and the New Jersey Devils for 7 years, retiring in 1989. Mark Pavlich played with the Rangers, Minnesota, San Jose, And he was, interestingly, he was never drafted. So his time in the Olympics brought him to the attention of the NHL, and he was signed and enjoyed a very distinguished career.
Well, that's not surprising, considering that the players that he chose for the team were the players that he wanted, not necessarily the best players available.
Exactly.
You learn that near the beginning of the movie. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was a very good player, as it turned out anyway. David Silk played with Boston, Winnipeg, Detroit, and the Rangers over a 5-year career. Jim Craig, the goalie, he played sporadically in the NHL. He was drafted by Atlanta and played with Atlanta for a while. And then he took a little time off, back to the U.S. National team, but then joined back in with Boston, and eventually he finished up with Minnesota in 1983. Now, here's an interesting little tidbit that might have something to do with your father. Not really directly, but indirectly.
Okay.
Craig Patrick, who played the assistant coach.
Yep. For the USA team.
For the USA team.
Yep.
His grandfather is Lester Patrick, who was the guy that built the New York Rangers. Or not built them, but,
right.
led them to their success after Conn Smythe built the team. In our history video and over in Post to Post, we did one of the New York Rangers, and Lester Patrick figures prominently as a player and then as an executive. Craig Patrick is his grandson. Craig Patrick was born in the United States, but to hone his hockey skills, he was sent to Quebec to play in the Junior League. And when he was 14, he played for the Lachine Maroons in the Lachine Arena. Yeah, that would be about 1960 or 61, about 10 years or so before I played my minor hockey in the same arena. So it's a small world.
A little connection there.
Very little. Yeah. And then he went on and coached the New York Rangers in Pittsburgh, and he was the general manager in Pittsburgh for 2 of their Stanley Cup wins.
Wow.
So Craig Patrick is a well-known and
distinguished career.
Yeah. He played NHL hockey with the California Golden Seals, St. Louis, Washington Capitals, and the Kansas City Scouts.
Boom.
Who became the
New Jersey Devils.
Eventually, with Colorado in between.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Herb Brooks, he was killed in a car accident many years ago.
Yeah, we were doing the photography for the movie.
Yeah.
So we didn't actually get to see the movie.
Didn't get to see the movie. And I just read just the other day that Herb Brooks was born 80 years ago this week. So this would have been his 80th birthday sometime this week, if what I read is actually correct.
Good time to make this video then, I guess.
Yeah. But prior to his death and after the Olympics, he did coach in the NHL. He coached for the Rangers. He coached in Minnesota, and he also coached in the New Jersey organization, too. So
awesome.
The Miracle on Ice is truly a miracle, and I think it probably did a lot to raise the profile of the game of hockey in the eyes of the citizens of the United States.
Absolutely.
Because up until then, it was probably just a regional passion, in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Massachusetts. And then, this is probably the gift to Gary Bettman right here.
Well, I mean, it was about amateurs back then. There was no professionals allowed,
Yeah.
and no one really cared who was going to be on the USA team except for the hardcore hockey fans. And it would be the same today, except a little further. I mean, the true hardcore hockey fans in the United States and Canada, NHL players aren't going to the Olympics, the next Olympics.
Right.
We're still going to care about who's on that team.
Yes, we are.
But it's going to lose some interest, unfortunately.
It probably is, and it may gain some people back, though, who thought it was just it's not really right to have a bunch of millionaires chasing a little black buck around for Olympic gold. And I'll be watching.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely going to watch. It's just I'm going to be frustrated.
We're Canadian. It's in our DNA. We have to watch no matter what happens.
Yeah, we'll get in trouble if we don't.
Yeah, but I think all the countries, even those who can't ice NHL players, and the KHL will have a leg up. If the KHL lets its players play, most of them would be Russian or at least Eastern European, those teams will be expected to dominate. But there are a lot of good players to go around in North America, and even those who are not signed to NHL contracts can probably still make up a pretty good team.
Absolutely.
So we'll see what happens.
It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be another good story to come of it. Who knows?
Let's hope.
Yeah. So thank you very much for doing all that research and doing this video with me. It was a lot of fun. I learned a
appreciate
lot.
it. I had a lot of fun, too.
The movie was good. And thank you for all of you guys at home who suggested it, and hopefully you had fun following along as well.
And I don't know about the United States, but in Canada, the movie is on Netflix. It's easy to get. If you have Netflix, it's right there. Now, whether the American Netflix has it, because each country's different, I don't know, but check it out.
Yeah, we just watched it on Netflix, so it's pretty easy.
Pretty easy.
All right, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you liked it. If you did, hit the like button. If you're new to this channel, hope you can hit the subscribe button and join us for more videos. And we'll see you later. Adios.